Hail thee well and welcome all. I'm the Jake of all trades, and today on the Master of Fun show, I'm going to be introducing a new series, my Dungeon Master Masterclass, where I share with you my own tips and tricks for improving your tabletop role-playing game. So, you've got some friends who want to play a game, and they've all dedicated some time that they can spend to play this game every week or so, and everybody wants you to be the Dungeon Master. So now you are all sitting around the table deciding what you're going to play. This is Session 0, and also the topic of today's video. I'm going to be sharing with you guys the checklist that I use whenever I start a new game, or have a Session 0. And it's a pretty short list. Starting from the beginning, we're going to start at the top of Session 0 and work our way to the end. And by the end of it, you should have a pretty good idea of what your Session 0 will look like. So we're going to get right into it. Before we get into it, though, I do have a golden rule for Session 0, and pretty much for the game afterwards. Your golden rule for your game is that your players' enjoyment of the game supersedes your own enjoyment, or what your players want to do kind of essentially sort of supersedes what you want to do. You will always want to be considering your players above yourself. You do want to consider yourself. It's not just your players. You do factor into this equation as the game master. You do want to be sure that you have some say over what game you are playing. If you don't enjoy the game, there's no way that your players are going to enjoy the game. But conversely, if your players don't enjoy the game, there's no way that you can possibly enjoy the game either. And a lot of the times I find that when my players are having fun, I'm having fun. And so my golden rule is to make sure that my players are having fun, and then I almost always will be enjoying myself as well. Now that that's out of the way, we can jump into it. So the first item on my list is going to be the game. You gotta choose what game you're playing, obviously. And you probably have an idea, or your players have an idea, or they've pitched a few ideas to you. But if you have a couple ideas for games, and you want to pitch maybe a variety of games to your players, and have them pick the one that sounds most interesting to them, I have a few tips for how you can possibly do that. So I came across this idea to use slider scales, going one way or the other towards like a high-low to tell your players, or quickly explain your players what your campaign is about or what it's like. And there's a variety of different labels that you can use for these sliders, which is the thing that I like about them, to sort of prioritize the things that you want to emphasize about your game. So like lethality is one, how lethal is your game on a scale of low to high, or 1 to 10 or something like that. You can use these slider scales to give your players an idea of what you have in mind for these games. And I'll be showing you a picture over here with one of my sketches of those little slider scales for different campaigns. And typically I would recommend using only like 2 or 3, maybe 4 of those. I think I use 5, but that's more for me, because there's a lot of stuff that that can potentially play a part. On some of those I probably didn't have to include a few of those sliders, and so I could have done with only 3 or 4 on most of those. But that's beside the point. So let's talk about some of these while I've got them up still. We have player control, we have fantasy, we have balance, we have politics, and lethality, which we just mentioned. So player control is on a scale of railroad to sandbox, which is I thought it was kind of funny, which is why I included it. How much control do the players have over their destiny, over the gameplay, over the quests? So that is what that slider is meant to represent. The fantasy slider is meant to represent the fantasy, the magic level, like how fantastic is it? How magical is it? The balance is simply a matter of, that's on a role-play to combat slider. And that is, what's the emphasis on the game? Is it more of a role-playing game where you are speaking in character and solving problems through diplomatic means or with your wits? Or is it more of a combat game where you are fighting stuff a lot and you have to overcome your problems with brute force? Politics was the other one, and that's on a simple high to low, as you can see, and or low to high. And the politics is to represent how much politics is in the game. How strongly do politics play a part in the game? So a lot of my games tend to have politics, and that's why I felt like I should include a politics slider, so that my players were aware of what they might be getting themselves into. I try not to require politics for my games, but invariably political situations will come up focusing on the players, and the players will have, feel more and more obligated to become a part of this world. That's sort of how I create those situations. And then, of course, the lethality. How lethal is your game, as I mentioned earlier. So those are a few of the tools that I use whenever I'm pitching a new game. And you can see above that I also have a length indicator to determine how, and that's to give the players an idea of how long the campaign I have planned for that game is. And you can see for the Avatar game, it's 5 to 20. We started at 5th level, and I went to 20 plus, possibly epic. That's up to the players and whether or not we get that far. But you can see that a few of the others, are much shorter, like the Wizarding School is like approximately level 1 to 10. It's a pretty low-level campaign. It would probably only last a couple months before it came to an end. And that way my players know that before they start the game. Well, you pitched a few games to your players using these slider scales, and the players had problems with a couple of your games. They weren't crazy about this one. They liked the sound of it, but they thought that the length was too long. They weren't willing to dedicate to an epic level campaign, or perhaps they want something a little more laid back. They don't want something with a high lethality level where they're likely to die if they aren't extremely careful all the time. So you like I said earlier, the golden rule is to focus on your players. You want to make sure that they are happy, and if they have a problem with one of your sliders or a couple of your sliders, then you shouldn't have a problem just kind of moving those one way or the other to accommodate your players. I feel like if you can keep most of the sliders in their original position, then you are still able to create a game that is very true to your original creation, what you had in mind for it originally. And the player's happiness supersedes your happiness in this situation. You want to make sure that your players are interested and invested in this game, especially since it hasn't even started yet. So now we have a game, and presumably we have a system in place. Hopefully we have a system that we've chosen. Now the next thing that I always like to go over is alignment. And I know it's kind of a touchy subject in most tabletop role-playing games. Everyone has their own opinions about alignment and how it should be used. But when I say this, it's very loosely. It's what kind of a game is it going to be? Is it going to be a good-centered game, or is it going to be an evil-centered campaign, or is it going to be more of a neutral, riding the line, morality is gray sort of game? And this is very important for player cohesion a lot of the times. I find that, if you have that one evil character in a good party, or even that one good character in an evil party, you find that the players are not enjoying themselves like they might otherwise be. And so it's very important that during session 0, you go over your players, you talk to your players about alignment. This is very crucial. I cannot emphasize this enough. It is very important that you are all on the same page about alignment. And if a character wants to play an evil character, you have to talk to them about possibly a redeeming story arc where they see the error in their ways and come over to the side of good. Or vice versa. Maybe a good character is broken to become more of an evil aligned character. That's up to the game. That's up to your players. That's up to you. But you want to be sure that you talk about it and that you are all on the same page before you get started. With alignment out of the way, we are ready to generate characters, I believe. I think we're all ready. So if you know what system you're playing, you should have a book ready, and you should have some character sheets ready, and hopefully some pencils and some erasers for your players, and they can start creating their characters. And this is going to be a very, very labor-intensive process for you, more so the more familiar you are with the game versus how familiar they are. If they don't know much about the game, they're going to be asking you lots of questions. And depending on what kind of game you're playing, they might be asking you lots of questions about the world that you are going to be playing in as well. And so you're going to have to dedicate a lot of time to answering these questions to the best of your abilities, so that they are able to create characters to accurately fill in this world. This is a very critical stage, and you want to be sure that you give all of your players the attention that they need. Make sure that everyone has all of their questions answered, and that everyone is able to generate their characters smoothly and integrate them into the world as far as they want to go. Obviously, you can't push your characters into immersing them in the world, but you can try to encourage them to become a part of this world and to become people who inhabit it rather than people playing in it. Earlier, we figured out what game we were going to be playing, and we're going to come back to that now, because that is now important again. We want to talk about real quickly whether or not we're playing a railroad or a sandbox game. And I've got bad news for you game masters. Either way, you are in for quite a bit of work. If they say that they want to do even if they say they want to do a railroad game, and you have all kinds of stuff planned out, you still have to write all of those adventures, and you still have to create a host of NPCs, depending on the length of your campaign, perhaps, up to 15 or 20 level or so. And you have to generate all of this stuff. The bright side in that case is that you know what is happening, and you can kind of direct things towards that end. But bad news, even if you are running a sandbox, you are still in for a lot of work. Not knowing what your players are doing or what the main quest is, or not having a main quest, means that you are constantly going to be creating new villages, new cities, maps, dungeons, caves, forests, creating different stat cards for random traveling mobs and monsters and villains and all kinds of stuff. Just as much work as otherwise. So either way, you're in for a lot of work. So, but hey, we wouldn't do it if we didn't love it, right? On the next episode of my Game Master Masterclass, I'm going to be breaking down Session 1 for you and showing you some of the stuff that I like to do to make my games run a little smoother. In the meantime, thanks for listening, and I hope to see you soon.